So, welcome, Gossamer, to Beyond the Blocks, a show I run with Art Blocks, and super excited to have you on here. I've known you for a while. I don't think we have ever chatted, though. Especially not on a show like this. Um, the the first time that I've heard of you was actually with Proof, when you did your piece for Grails. Which was an amazing piece and such a one that was very like unexpected, like of how you actually went about doing that. Maybe you can give everybody like a little background on yourself and what you think is most what do you try to bring forth in your art practice?
Sure. So my name is Gossamer. I'm a fine artist and a tattooer based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm actually here today at my storefront called Tigerbob Store here in Brooklyn. It's located in Industry City, which is a large complex of artist studios and small businesses right here in the heart of Sunset Park. A lot of my art practice is uh, developing a lot of different processes that I have a material and like an affinity for like detailed mark making techniques. And that's translated over from my fine art practice that's really heavily based in illustration. I'm pretty self-taught in my illustration work. It started with media like manga and anime, so like cartoons, comic books, and things like that. And as I matured into art school and everything, I started getting influences from folk art from across the world and also different kinds of textiles and textile practices. So I've had this unique visual language that's clearly like very inspired by the Asian side of my heritage. I'm Filipino and African American, and the artwork that my mother had brought back from the Philippines for us, since I've never been there, a lot of it was heavily Chinese and Japanese art pieces. So all of these pieces I grew up with, and that explains why like I gravitated towards more commercial and like pop culture media in that area. So my exploration with folk art and other media across the world, and textile work is also because I've always loved to do hand sewing. That was something that my mom taught me at an early age, and I was already designing my own little clothes and like little plush toys, especially when I was a teenager and a young child. So I took a lot of that with me as an adult into my practice, um, which uh, I started with. I decided to not try and like approach the transformation of my visual language too quickly. When I was a college student, I actually decided to take a major in sculpture so that I could find other ways to
Oh, wow.
express my visual language. Yes. So that allowed me to kind of transform my work without having to like necessarily make changes directly to the illustrative style of my work. Instead, it could be transformed by the different media I was working in. And so I have a lot of work that I make. Right now, I do a lot of knitted works. And I also make a lot. I used to do a lot of cut and sew clothing. I had done that in 2020, and with the Tigerbob brand, I wanted to focus on knitting and like almost like a tapestry weaving type work. And I consider knitting a process that can allow you to make a quite a detailed image with a lot of different colors, especially the handmade nature of that can be done. And also, I really enjoy the connection to how a lot of textile work is involved with computer techniques and programming techniques. One of the earliest variations of like an early programming was the Jacquard loom, which was created in the 1800s. And it used the punch card, which directed the machine to make very complex brocade and jacquard designs. And this is a very early version of computing that is still used. That took us through the middle of the 20th century. And now we have very, very advanced computing where, you can put quite a bit of information right on your computer with scripts and making generative art that way. So I've been making this connection with my work over the couple decades I've been practicing, and yeah, it's always been an interesting development to see how my work can also be so like hands-on and tactile and physical, but also and reference something very old and traditional, and also really bring in the connection to modern computing and how we can make art and use technology to create different kinds of artwork.
No, it's crazy to me when I think of your work of how many different mediums you work in, and you're comfortable working in and exploring. I think some artists go into one medium and they kind of stick with it and they just want to do that medium. What made you want to do a lot of different mediums and kind of cross different media and string them together and what do you get out of doing that?
Yeah, I think ultimately there's like two different categories of artists. There are artists that have one specific practice and that's like their single meditation, and that like is what makes sense for them. I also think that in some ways if you're practicing in one specific medium with one specific visual language, it's easier to follow like the breadcrumbs of like how your practice is progressing. I feel the other kind of artist is someone who practices a multidisciplinary practice that involves a lot of different explorations that may not necessarily be limited to one specific material or process. And this could be for conceptual reasons or for various other of reasons. It could also be like the way that they're creating work could be more product based, or it could be more kind of like an intersection of like design and other media and not just fine art. I personally really enjoy being multidisciplinary, and I think that it benefits me because it's just very interesting to be drawing these conclusions together. I practiced my drawing style for a really long time, my illustrative work, and it just always felt like there was something missing. Um, and so, trying to incorporate these different mediums that I also find an affinity to, and trying to marry them under a visual language that makes sense, that's something that eluded me for about 10 years. And it became my goal to unite these things when I went into college back in 2008. And it took until I created the Tigerbob brand in 2022 and was able to really launch this project that could unite these processes together, where it really started feeling like, okay, now I'm going to have more of a body of work that's identifiable. That also I feel unites not just the different mediums, but also the concept of them, and like and more of an understanding for myself of why these different processes are interesting and give me a lot of meditation.
That's great. And no, and it shows in your work, and it is something that's key to your work, I think, is that you are crossing kind of all these different mediums and also, very different, uh, you can call it not only, almost like you said, like fine art and the commercial kind of thing as well, right? With your store and also the brand, and things like that. Do you find that, I guess it's a question that comes up is, um, like what is the like, do you think obviously you agree that, fine art and commercial can kind of like go together, right? Like an artist can be a fine artist and they also can be a commercial artist, and there's not a problem with that, right? And do you find that that's, I assume you agree with that, right?
Yes,
I
of
mean,
course, yes.
yeah. Yeah, and I guess my question is just that I know some people like unfortunately like kind of force you into one way or the other, right?
Right.
Of you have to be, if you're a fine artist, then you're a fine artist, and if you start doing commercial work, then it's kind of like sometimes looked upon as oh, that's not like to the level of fine art, so it's like beneath you or something like that, which is you know, but you know, you look at examples throughout history, Andy Warhol, and like, you know, a number of many artists like crossing that boundary successfully. So, what are your thoughts on like this whole thing of you know, commercial versus fine art?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is an age-old topic. We can go all the way back to the Renaissance and even before that, where everything was kind of patroned by someone commissioning a work. And so, if we talk about, you know, trying to find the differences and the intersections between commercial and fine art, there was a time where it kind of was the same thing. Like that was how you created work. That was you had a patron who bought art for you, and it was their concept, their location, like the Sistine Chapel. That was commissioned, but it's fine art, right? Not commercial, but it was something that was
Yeah,
purchased by someone specifically. It's hard to look at it that way because of what commercial art means today, and it's so much
yeah,
more of a broad term, especially if we think about art as merchandise, and then art as design, and then art as a commissioned work. Like there are all these separate categories of artwork in this age of capitalism and advertising. And I think that that can make it confusing. I think for new artists who are trying to figure out where they're like product market fit. I have to say it that way because art is also a
yeah.
business. And I have to
Yes, of
see,
course. People
right.
need to eat, right?
Because,
Artists need to
correct.
need to need to afford to pay the rent, right?
Absolutely.
It's
And
in
like
everything.
making fine art is also a type of art product. So when we think
Yes.
about these different categories of like commercial versus fine art, I think that traditionally, and having gone to art school, like I'm really happy, excited to speak on this, is that I feel like art school really wants to silo you into either a designer or a fine artist. And it's like
Yeah.
it's extremely siloed. Like, I never saw any of the kids who were in illustration, in graphic
Yeah.
design, industrial design, even though industrial design has a lot to do with sculpture. It was just a completely different perspective of how we approach creating art, where either it's more who is your client, how you approach your client, and then for fine art, it's like how do you approach your body of work? How do you build that? And I feel like there's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of room for both to occur.
Yes.
And I'm trying to make that work with what I'm doing. It's kind of weird to like back into it, but I think it is and that was the whole point of creating Tiger Bob. That's why I
Yeah.
have the Tiger Bob brand. Tiger Bob is my platform. And I'm the designer for Tiger Bob to create art products that can create a successful business. And at the same time, the Tiger Bob brand gives me a platform and finances in order to create more experimental works like the work you see behind me, where I'm starting to bridge more into fine art. Especially, and I think that that is very intentional, especially since knitting is most often perceived as a domestic item, as something that's a commercial product, rather than a
Yeah.
fine art product. And so it's extremely intentional that I'm making fine art with a practice that is traditionally seen as being more commercial.
Yeah, and 100%. I mean, it's also, I think, if you like digital art, you know, and all these type of new media art, I think it's, you know, if you do a lot of, if you do any of these type of things, it's like you're more pushed towards that designer. Oh, you must be a designer, or you must be, you know, hopefully it's getting better kind of with, you know, more institutional academic recognition, but I think we still got a long way to go with having, you know, art schools and things like that put digital art and on the same kind of playing field and with the same respect as painting and as sculpture and these other forms of art. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And I think that that's one thing that NFTs in particular, that's one thing that I gravitated to NFTs for, is that there was finally this way where you could take something that wasn't necessarily seen as fine art, like this a digital art practice, and you could, finally tokenize it and like create a way to buy, sell, and trade that artwork, in the same way that the fine art world already was able to do. And in that way, I saw a lot of opportunities for a lot of my interests, which a lot of them lied in creating video games. That was like a huge part of the type of media that I took in as a child and growing up. And it was something I had such a huge interest in. I had even interned at Harmonix Music Systems at the time that they were creating Rock Band. And it was like a really eye-opening experience to not only see the process of like how a commercial video game gets made, but also seeing that it felt so far away from being a fine art practice that one person could do on their own. It kind of reminded me of how some comic book projects involve separate people for inking, for penciling,
Yes.
for and it was like, well, I'm going to do it all. Like that's what I want to do, right? It's like, well, I felt the same way about wanting to make a video game. And when I discovered NFTs, I was like, wow, it feels like I could really kind of figure out a way to do that and then have some way to distribute it to people. And so that's what led me to creating Tigerbob Mystery Garden with art blocks is my first foray into translating my work, which also works for my fine art practice of knitting and hand drawn artwork, in a way that's interactive for people. Yeah.
It's amazing. Let's talk about your Art Blocks project. It was released a few weeks ago on Art Blocks Studio. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about it, the inspiration behind it, etc.
Sure. So Tigerbob Mystery Garden is a zero-player interactive art game. I've called it myself an art game just because, in my opinion, it's more of an exploration to discover and interact with my artwork, that's personal for the person who's collecting and also viewing and discovering the artwork in the game. Now, it's zero player in the sense that the game will automatically generate itself without input. For example, the hash on creating the NFT on minting the piece determines the first 24 tiles, which these Jacquard tiles, which look similar to the piece back here, because because the piece back here directly inspired the types of tiles and the visual language for the work. It uses the same tile set as what you see back here. And so these tiles are
It's
repeating.
amazing how you were able to get it so accurate, or you were able to translate it,
Exactly.
right,
Yeah.
to digital. That's not an
hmm
easy thing to do.
Yeah. And
So
that's
yeah,
that practice itself of translating my pixel art into these different digital mediums, which also include my knitting machine, the textile computer, or your browser with JavaScript, actually involves the same kind of spreadsheet work that I did in my piece with Proof called Iteration Zero. So that piece was
that
copied.
was
Yep.
amazing.
So that
We got to
same
talk about
process,
that. Yeah.
I stuck with that process. So Iteration Zero was one of my first explorations with creating artwork on spreadsheets. I made the artwork on Google Sheets by copying and pasting different characters and symbols from Unicode, and then adjusting the colors of the characters as well as the background of the character right in the sheets. So I made it's two different frames, and so it's animated in Photoshop. So it's a GIF format piece. So that piece was really interesting I was very, very excited about the feedback, especially because of the Grails process is like
Yeah.
involved in this like kind of almost blind box. You don't know who made the art piece, and seeing
Yeah.
everybody's responses of trying to figure out who made this piece was so fascinating.
That was it was very funny. Yeah.
It was so
How did you
funny.
get the idea to like use Google Sheets? Is there a community
um
of artists that are using Google Sheets to make
um
art, or
it
did you just like come up
It
with
was
that one
something.
day?
So before I quit my day job in 2018 to be a full-time fine artist through my tattoo work, I was actually working finance. So I had a job working in student loan servicing, and I was doing a lot of presentations for our compliance department on spreadsheets. And so I
Yeah.
was like famous for these beautiful spreadsheets that I loved putting together. I was doing a lot of analyzing data and trying to find ways to improve the business. That was like my whole position while I was working there. And so I really spent a lot of time organizing data in different ways. And this is kind of all like self-taught, you know. I mean, I have like
Yeah.
some business certificates, some project management, but this is definitely like I just found a way to like enjoy this data entry type of process, which involves typing. And so
Yes.
my mark making is typing,
Yeah.
right?
Wow. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
So my
That's
mark
so
making is typing for
interesting.
creating these digital pieces. So when I'm translating this pixel art, I design it all in Photoshop. And then I'm literally looking at, I have the grid laid out in like 5 by 5 pixels per, which is also based on the knitting machine. I was using the antique Mylar sheets, which you have to actually color in like the binary.
Wow.
Yep. So I have those, and that's also like the direct reference to the punch card where the punched hole indicates, you know, the binary. So it was the same
Yeah.
thing as like indicating all the different colors. I would look at my drawing as my reference, and as I go through the spreadsheet, I fill in a number, a numerical value for each of the colors that I need to translate for my pixel art in JavaScript. And that's like the
Wow.
majority of the code. I think like 90% or 80% of like the 1 megabyte of is just 103 tiles, which are
Wow.
matrices, they're arrays that are 75 rows tall and 60 columns wide. So
Wow.
that's the data that's stored in. That's how I
Yeah.
would store the data.
That's so cool.
So I'd put that in a spreadsheet. Yeah.
It's so cool that you're able to use this like almost, pixels, but in like not pixels. Like in the
Right.
digital art, it's pixels, but it's
Mhm.
like, it's all these, like you're saying, binary squares really, or
Mhm.
like elements almost,
Yep.
that you're using to kind of translate this art across mediums.
Mhm.
And it's really cool when you to hear you explain that and to see how you're translating it.
And yeah, when you think about it, like LEDs and like trying to like program, like it's the same thing. Like everything is stored in a matrix. Like it's matrices all the way down. And I'm like starting
Yeah.
to realize it's like that's simply how data is stored. Like exactly what I'm doing is
Well,
how you store
even
data. And I didn't even
even
realize
like
it like through
yeah,
my
LLMs,
textiles.
like you think about it, if you learn about LLMs and AI, like it's like if when you look at an LLM model, that's what it is as well. It's like these vectors which are just like very similar to like,
Hmm.
basically it's just like we can't even fathom how many
Yeah.
dimensions of arrays it is, but it's all these relationships that are like
Hmm.
coded into that kind of data structure, which is
Hmm.
pretty amazing. So it's like
Yeah,
even the AI stuff
it's
is
amazing
that,
how such a simple data structure is still relevant. And it could be as simple as a punch card to like what you see with LLMs. It's like crazy that that format still remains the same across different levels of computing.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. Um, I think too is like so the Tigerbob brand. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure.
In your store that you
Yep.
have in New York. Tell us a little bit about when you opened that.
Yeah, yeah.
All about it. Can people visit it?
Yeah.
That type of thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So Tiger Bob, the brand was created in 2022 with the launch of what was popular at the time are PFPs. So I created
Yeah.
this 1,000 piece PFP project. It was all made by hand. So I made each of the tokens myself with pixel art. And the goal for creating it is that I had finally decided on this umbrella image, this piece of my visual language that I wanted to use as a base to develop and combine these different processes together. So I finally felt, okay, now I have this piece um, my of my hand drawn work, basically, that I really felt an affinity for, that I felt like I could um, identify with and like expand upon as like, the titular character of like my world, Tigerbob. The brand was started in 2022, and the goal was to get some funds so I can get like a real thing going, especially in real life. I had
Yeah.
been siloed to relying on my tattoo practice for income. And while that was going well, like tattooing is one of the few art practices that you can only create a finite amount of work in a period of time.
Yeah.
And that's because you can't outsource it. You can't
Yeah.
outsource it to anyone or anything. Otherwise, it would be a different product. And you also cannot, eventually, it requires your body. Like, no matter
Yeah.
how advanced machines or anything gets, like, it requires like physical one-to-one interaction with a client in order for it to produce. And that means that it requires a certain amount of time that can't be outsourced either. So you can
Yes.
actually sit down and calculate, if you tattoo X amount of days for a whole year, that's the maximum amount of money you could make
Yeah.
if you're even able to tattoo all those days, let alone get
Yeah.
clients. And even for like, and like, as you get older, you're going to lose the ability to do certain things. It's extremely taxing on the body. I have been very well aware of the strain like my drawing and other practices do on my hands and also my back. And so, like, it's something that I knew very early on. All right, I need to make sure that I need to build something that can also create passive income, and I
Yeah.
need to not be siloed into only working on one type of artwork because I'm getting burnt out, like, legitimately.
Yeah.
So that was the reason and the goal for creating Tigerbob, was to create this business model where me as the artist, I'm supported with finances, I'm supported, and I'm able to create, and for that support, I'm required to use good business sense to create products that will eventually be profitable in order to grow the business, because I can't take away from the business to the point where the business fails. It has to be a mutual process where, like, I'm able to do experiments and create fine art and create new products, with the end goal being that it benefits the business and then therefore allows me to continue experimenting and scaling up. It's a very long, slow process, because it's only me and I can only do so much. From designing a plush toy to designing knitwear, which I had to learn from scratch as well,
Yeah.
which is its own project, right? To my hand drawn artwork being prints, socks, and other kinds of like different art products that have the Tiger Bob imagery on it, or just my own fine art just being for sale. Like, those are different ways that I can create these different products that like disperse my work to people, from a variety of different price points, different ways of interacting with it, from like the playing cards I've created with my pixel art on them. That was also a past project. The Tiger Bob illustrations, that was also a past NFT project. And bringing those into the store and like integrating both my digital art practice. I have an iPad at the store that shows that right now has the Tigerbob Mystery Garden game on it. So people can
Nice.
view it, and then my fine art. So like, that's the goal of what I do with Tigerbob, is this mutual support system for the artist and the business without extracting so deeply from the artist. I see that happening so often with brands, just taking so much from artists, and like and they have
Yeah.
no say in it, and it's an awful system. So I felt like the best I could do to empower myself and other people was to just prove that this can work, and that this
Yeah.
this is like a way to build something that where you don't have to be siloed into only doing fine art and only trying to get gallery representation.
So how can people visit your store? Can they, is it, what area in New York is it in? You said it's in
Yeah, so we're in
Brooklyn. Did I
Sunset
get that
Park
right?
in Brooklyn. Yep,
I
it's
believe
in
so. Yeah.
Brooklyn. It's Sunset Park in Brooklyn. So we're open typically Thursdays through Sunday from like 1 to 5 p.m., sometimes a little later. But yeah, I'm open every weekend, and you can always drop us a line if you would like a private viewing during the week. I'm happy to come on over and show you around the store and everything. So, but yeah, it's like a normal storefront. So we're open 4 days
Wow.
a week.
Nice.
Yep. Hmm.
And it seems like one thing that I think even though you were saying, uh, you started the store because you didn't want to, you found it hard to, like, tattooing is like, you can't scale it all. You're saying, it's like you use your
Right. You
time and
can't.
you have to use your body and everything like that, right? To do that. But it still seems like you're really involved in the store. You're not, handing everything off to other people or anything. It seems like you're still kind of hand making, or at least really hand designing, putting a lot of effort into every one of these pieces. So
Yes,
um
absolutely.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
so all my tattoos are also done at the store. So you get the whole experience. And then my knitwear, I have a handful of handmade pieces that I make. And then the rest of the knitwear is actually knit right next door to my studio, across to the next building. I've been collaborating with a knitwear factory called Tailored Industries since 2022. And we work together on the designs. I make all of the schematics and like all of the details of the grading and the I make them the textile charts for my intarsias, the knit designs. This is a piece I'm wearing too that I designed, and they'll knit them next door for me. So everything is like pretty micro, like local. That I always have my hand in like everything.
And that's so great you're able to, yeah, see the whole process as the artist. And I can imagine the quality is going to be really great because of that, because anytime um, the artist is involved at that level of detail into selecting the materials, the way it's produced, all those kind of things. That's you're going to get the best quality product that way. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that that's what creates the difference between just like regular merch and like actually making like a product that's more like an art product is the fact that I'm not just slapping a tiger bob on like a t-shirt
yeah,
or
screen
whatever.
printing on
Like,
something on
yeah,
some
it's
random
like
site.
yeah, it's not just
Cafe
like a
press.
pre-made blank. Like I'm like taking the time to create the fabric and everything. And then even for the plushie, I collaborated with a company overseas in China. But for me, like I have cut and sew skills, so I actually made modifications to the samples that they sent me. I would like
Yeah.
take the piece apart. I would take the plush apart and like scan in all the different pieces and like give them exact dimensions for the embroidery. So like it was like I made like like the sampling was
Yeah,
done
I'm
by
sure they
me.
weren't used
Like,
to that.
yeah. No, no, they weren't. They were very excited that like I just
Someone
know
actually,
what I
yeah, like,
need.
or
Yeah,
was
yeah.
giving them
Because then they
feedback.
don't right, because they don't have to guess. Like, and be like, listen,
Yeah.
this is the pattern you're using, so just use that, and then send me the finished of that you produced of this exact design that I made. And it's like
Yeah.
it's a really good like way to work.
You were
Mhm.
able to kind of do the inside knowledge of that craft, so you're
Mhm.
able to speak to them on that level.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's so hard to make a well-made item if you don't understand like the construction, like how it's made, and like also if you don't understand a material. So that's why I also make art products that are completely in line with stuff I've done by hand before. Because it's just more relevant. Like I'm more informed about the type of product I'm creating and how people interact with it. It's not some like mystery. thing just being thrown at the wall and seeing how people respond. Like I've this is like something very thought out. And that's what makes me excited about continuing to do what I do is that like I pivot from working on the JavaScript work, with art blocks, and then now I'm knitting a tapestry, and then now I'm working on a design for a new piece of knitwear, or like uploading my artwork to create some temporary tattoos, or it's like there's like all this stuff going on, which is like it's chaotic and fun, but it's a lot. I love it though. It's definitely feels like a cohesive brand, it's like cohesive. It's like it's just really put together, and having the space here, the physical space, I think makes a lot more sense for people who are discovering me for the first time, or they've seen my growth from the last several years and seen how it all fits together.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna ask you, what do you think about because you are kind of have done apparel and these type of things, like I always think about like generative clothing, and I know a lot of some artists, have thought of that, and you know, it's always so tricky though because of what you're mentioning of to do it at scale and still maintain quality, but also like even to just do it at scale. Like when I've looked into it, like on the manufacturing side, it's like very little is like you have to do it this bespoke the way you're doing it, right? Because just like if you were to try to do it at a scale, it seems like the machines just aren't set up like they're set up to like
Right.
do a run of a large run with one design on them or one
Yeah. Yeah.
something on them, like just the manufacturing isn't set up to do like, oh, just like spit out okay a unique version of that. Like at
Yeah.
least what I've
Exactly.
found so far. Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason why it's so difficult to make a series of like one-off generative, even not generative, say you have like five different sweater designs and they all have a different design on them. So what's important to note is that each sweater design is its own program. So like when you make a change, usually colors are interchangeable as long as it's the same amount of colors per design. But if you have like I have a design with a tiger and then I have a design with a dragon, those are two completely different programs that need to be programmed separately. And the reason
Yeah.
is because of, and specifically for knitwear, it's because of the yarn tension. It's because of the
Yeah.
type of yarn material. It's because of the construction of a garment. You can think of the construction of a product like a plush toy or a garment as architecture, and you need a specific amount of materials. They need to be cut a specific way. They need to be put together a specific way, and the instructions are going to be different for each one. And that's what makes it difficult to have like to scale like a generative type of product. I feel like the merch team, they've made some generative clothing, has done a really good job finding a happy medium with that by mixing and matching specific pieces of a garment and letting that be the part, like the different pieces of fabric that get sewn together, be the part that's generative.
Yeah.
That's still costly and takes time because now it's like, all right, we have to put together like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many pieces are like
Yeah. It's still
500 different things.
for sure. And what, Eric, Snowfro is doing with generative goods and over there, like, it's still
Hmm.
they're still doing embroidery and these type of things, but it's still a lot of manual work to put those together. You couldn't
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
do at least what they're doing now at like a, really big scale because it still does require,
Right. Yeah.
um, some manual like embroidery sitting at an embroidery machine or something like
Right.
that
Yeah.
or it's just as the
At the
cost is
very,
going to
yeah.
be a little higher. Yeah.
Yeah, at the very least, just being able, you just need to spend time switching between. each of the programs and making sure, like, a human still needs to do that, like switch between the different
Yeah.
programs, do the embroidery. And like that's why, like, for me, like Tigerbob is also a way for me to gain skills and equipment to make as many things as I can in-house. Like, I would
Yeah.
love absolutely to have a more commercial scale knitting machine that I have and can control, so I can make like generative pieces and like make a selection of like maybe 20 sweaters that go on sale. Like, that's still like a large undertaking, but if it's in house, like, then I can control how much time I spend on it, the limitations of the machine, and how much it can produce. And then it's just more of like a specialty factory. I consider Tiger
Yeah.
Bob's store to be a specialty store because of, you know, some of that already being part of the process. I already make a lot of garments on my vintage knitting machines. It's a bit slower than a commercial one, but I'm still able to make a very finished, fully fashioned garment by hand.
Yeah. That's amazing. And yeah, it's something I would like to see more generative artists maybe try, or something like that is like maybe they have their NFT project maybe on art blocks or generative art, but then maybe that's like the print version of it that people can order there, or maybe it's even not even backed by an NFT. Maybe it's just like that's the apparel is the art in that case, and you kind of generate I could even see it being like you can just click and kind of keep hitting generate until you like find one you like, and then say, okay, I want to do this. I know definitely. I don't want I want to give people credit also, because there has been a couple um with Trom, and then I believe Anna Lucia has done something around this. There's been a couple different artists. Um, uh, I think Finger Code has also done this. There's been a number of different artists that have worked with generative textiles at this point. Luke Shannon has also done something with like kind of related to this. So like but they're mostly textiles, like tapestries, that type of thing. I haven't seen much of like clothing or apparel as much, like at a larger scale
Yeah.
from like a art blocks project or something like that, right?
Yeah, I would love to work on a more large scale like textile piece. I'm actually going to be working on another JavaScript art project, and it's going to be mostly focused on still images. That way I can like knit them. I also felt like they would make some interesting framed tapestries, which is kind of like a
Yeah.
step up from just making a print. I really think that it would be extremely relevant for me to invest in a plotter and have like my pixel art drawn with this plotter on as like kind of a more hands-on print than just like a digital print. I think that that's also extremely relevant to what I'm doing with my practice on the knitting machines. So there's a lot of different places, a lot of different directions I'd like to go with this, but definitely like doubling down on creating more physicals that maybe not necessarily tied to like an NFT, although I would really like that. Is but also just making more physical pieces that use outputs or the algorithm from the script that I'm creating to as like the knitting chart or like the drawing
Yeah.
chart for the piece that I create the physical from. Mm-hmm.
That's how I like to look at first, like when, in 2021, when, kind of this all came about and kind of got popular. I first had this idea, like kind of which, Tyler Hobbs did with Ringer. I mean, with Fidenza, and then Dimitri actually did with Ringers, where they like, when they started doing the prints, which are in demand, they like said that, I mean, Dimitri specifically said he's only going to print one for each of the NFTs, right? And it's going to be labeled, and he's going to track it in a
Mm-hmm.
spreadsheet and things like that. And I think Tyler has something similar with Fidenza. Um, I have actually like come around to a different point of view on that. I actually view it of like similar to what you just said, where um, I view it as the NFT is like the template, and I'm actually, as an artist, like fine, you know, making multiple print, if people like, if the NFT changes hands, for example, right, and someone else wants a print and after they've bought it on secondary, like I'm totally fine with making multiple of the same output
Mm-hmm.
for that. And the reason why is because I look at the NFT, as you said, like a template, or like in a photography sense, like the negative.
Yep. Yep.
It's the archival like version of the art, and then from that we can create prints, or we can create, like you're saying, like the instances almost of
Mm-hmm.
that. And the instances are not the thing, which is the NFT, the like archival thing, which I think will hold a value, right? So
Right.
that's how
Right.
I've kind of framed it in my mind. Like I've come around to that. Like how does physicals relate to NFTs, right?
Yeah, I think another thing that's interesting is that there are collectors who they may prefer to collect the NFT and not have a physical. And then there are people who are like,
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't really care about having the NFT, but I would like a physical. And I did just recently
Yeah.
see that there was a sale of a Tyler Hobbs Fidenza, and it was just the print. It wasn't the NFT. They just sold the print.
Oh
And
wow.
I think
Yeah.
that that's interesting too. I think that there's so many different ways to collect and enjoy a work. I think provenance of NFTs is really special and important, and I think that it's um, incredibly important and like relevant for digital media, like generative art in particular. I think that the digital version is like you said, like that's the photography negative, that's the printmaker's plate. And then you can also create additional products. Like for example, like I have prints of like pieces that were NFTs. I have the original drawing as well, which could be sold separately, and like a lot of them I still have. So like there's all different ways, and that kind of goes back into like the design world of how like you sell a design, you sell the IP, or you keep you sell the IP, but you keep the design. It's like ownership and digital ownership, and then physical product ownership. It's like it really kind of has this huge spectrum of like how we can enjoy and distribute artwork across lots of different art products. And that's essentially what Tigerbob does. It's like it goes back to, this there's this theme of work that I'm producing, and these different ways of expressing and exploring it. And a lot of my customers, they don't even know anything about NFTs. They don't care about NFTs.
Yeah.
They may not, but they'll buy a sweater, or they'll buy like a print, and it's still something else, and it's still another way. I think of all these ways of distributing art, just more ways to get your art out. There's to the world. Like it doesn't, just in the same way as like your art still exists. If I share my art on social media, it still exists there. Like that, maybe that's not
Yeah.
the art that gets bought, but that's still another place where it exists that isn't the NFT. That's digital. So it's
Yes.
like there's now like another photocopy of a thing, of like this thing, which is interesting. So I feel it can, I mean, you can really go down the rabbit hole with it.
That was the whole debate at the beginning with,
Yeah.
NFTs, but that was the one analogy that like kind of sold me on that, on NFTs, or like why they were valuable, or like as a form, was kind of I think it was actually on the Proof podcast with Kevin and maybe DC Investor, when back in the early days of that podcast, where I think it was
Oh, right.
DC
I remember
Investor that
that episode.
made,
Mm-hmm.
it was a great episode. And and he made the kind of argument that if you had the Mona Lisa, right, in front of you, like there's so many copies of the Mona Lisa, and it like kind of a thought experiment is like, if it's like looks exactly the same, two different, like the Mona Lisa, there's one that's the real Mona Lisa and one that is looks exactly the same, you can't tell the difference, right? Which one is going to be more valuable, right? And it's like obvious when you think of it that way. So it's like interesting of
Uh-huh.
how that's like when people were saying, oh, I can just right click save it, right? So there's something
Mm-hmm.
about that about the NFT that is And one thing I do like about that is actually that it democratizes art in a way that it separates the ownership and uh, the kind of financial side of it from like people just enjoying art, right? It's like, you know,
Exactly.
where there's just so many of these really fine art pieces because they're only like they're a painting or something and they're in physical, like they can't be copied. They're like one
Hmm.
instance of it. They're like in a warehouse in Switzerland and no one will ever see them.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Yeah,
uh,
that's exactly how I feel
or
about it too.
like at least
Hmm.
maybe they have a picture of them online, but the only way like no one's going to see them in their actual native medium, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's something amazing about digital art and especially NFTs is it kind of like still allows for everyone to see it in its native medium, yet you know still has the element of this market or this financial side of it or ownership of it, which is interesting, and I think it helps to obviously reward artists, right? Like so that it's not just everybody's not going to pay the artist and just you know copy their work and right click save it.
Right. Yeah. I think it's really great how it disconnects the financialization of an art object from just the appreciation of and viewership, because right click saving doesn't cost anything, but is that
Yeah.
stealing? Like, I don't think so. Like, I think they're totally
No.
different scenarios. There are people who are like, oh, I'm happy just, anyone could walk into my store for free and look at my designs. Like, you could touch my sweater and not
Yeah.
buy it. And that's okay. You're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with, like, pictures
Yeah.
on the internet and saving it down, downloading it to your phone as a wallpaper. Like, that's cool. Like, you
Yeah.
can do that.
That's one thing
Hmm.
I mentioned it in I know the art blogs Discord when Snowfro came out with his latest his game that he came out with recently in that project with Glitch. And one of the things that I was just like, really I guess impressed with that was I love how he made it so that you can go to any one of the outputs and you can click it and download the ROM and like play that version of it. And I could
Hmm.
totally see another artist or like think that, oh, I'm going to actually like gate the download of the ROM to like only
Right.
the owner of that token, right? And no, he
Exactly.
made it so that you could just download any of them and play the game, that version of the game on a emulator or whatever. Like anybody can just click it, and I think that was like really great
Yeah.
choice, like to do
Hmm.
that.
And that's exactly the same reason why Tigerbob Mystery Garden, you don't have to own the NFT to play it. Like, you can just get on your
Yeah,
desktop and then go through any of the outputs and just start playing and enjoying it. And that's something I really
exactly.
felt like was like really important. Was for any types of like interactive game pieces I make, like perhaps like there's some way to like financially unlock something with other NFTs, which is something I'd like to explore in the future. I love what the Chunks project has done with that protocol. I think that that's really impressive and also really special for like financializing a game, but still making it possible for like anyone to just dip their hands into it and just start playing around and messing around
Yeah,
without having any kind of like fear of like needing to pay for anything. I think that's really special nowadays to be able to do that.
yeah, and I think that's something that we haven't. I know that like since NFTs got crazy, it's like people said oh, like, oh, the fine art people are coming or something like that for like, like this kind of like institutionalization of NFTs in these type of space. But I always have felt that it's like the real vision of this stuff is actually the opposite, right? It's
Hmm.
like we have an opportunity to get so much art in like people that would never collect art, right? Their hands. Like,
Right.
can we use generative art, and have really big collections with, uh, large outputs, right? And then by extension, they're pretty cheap for each one. But but like everybody can kind of afford to own one, right?
Yeah.
Versus
For
kind of the
me, it's
opposite
like,
model where it's very much like, limit your supply and make it as
it,
expensive as possible, right?
yes. Yeah, I mean, for me, like when I created, well, first of all, it's my first generative piece ever, Tigerbob Mystery Garden. Like I've never even, this is my
Yeah.
first time getting into it. My first minted generative piece. I made an open edition. I tried to make it an affordable price because it's like for me, it's like
Yeah.
selling copies of a Tamagotchi. Like it's all the same game. But what's special about it is like maybe the plastic's a
Yeah.
different color or it's a different like edition. Like that's how I want to distribute these art games. I'm actually surprised there aren't more people creating like little digital art games like Snow Froze Lift. I mean I was
Yeah.
creating Mystery Garden well before I even knew he was doing that. It just happened to be a coincidence that he also came out with this game right
That
around the
happens
time that
all
I
the
was
time.
finishing mine.
Artists have
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
plugged into the sublime or something in a way that we tend to come to the same idea at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. But I would love to see. I mean, I'm definitely going to be making more art games. I feel like this is the start of many explorations of like adding more cool stuff to the Mystery Garden or, creating a digital pet with Tiger Bob, which is huge on my list. And, that's something I've
That'd
always
be
been
cool.
passionate about. Are these like, yeah, 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 super like these like smaller like
Especially
game
if you could get it like
interactions.
embed like an actual keychain,
That's what
like
I've
that would be
always wanted. Like
crazy.
I've always been interested. See, I love Andreas uh Jason. I think that I hopefully I'm not like butchering his name. He's made a lot of like digital physical screens and like physical sculptural objects that hold his scripts and things, and I feel like that is so
That's really
relevant,
cool.
especially since I'm also like I am like a
You
sculptor
have a
and like
background in sculpture too. Yeah.
right, the physical presentation of it is extremely important. And like I feel like that would just be so relevant too. I've loved Tamagotchis forever. I've collected a lot of different types of small tiny little games like that, and I would absolutely love so much for Tiger Bob to be a little LCD like handheld that you can play with.
That
It'd
would
be
be
so
cool.
great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Gossamer, thank you so much for taking the time out. This was an amazing episode. Just learning about your practice and your brand, and also your Art Blocks project. And where can people like catch up, like keep up with what you're working on, and find out about new projects and releases and things like that.
Sure. Well, you can head over to tigerbob.global. That's my main website for the Tiger Bob brand. And if you're looking to shop on the online store, that's tigerbob.store. So those are my two main websites. I always have like the main updates about new NFT projects. And new art pieces that are more in the fine art world on Tiger Bob Global. And the web store, Tiger Bob Store, always has new stuff that's in the store itself that you can purchase. And yeah, I always have like information in my Discord, which is discord.gg/ Tigerbob as well. So you can join. There's a small little community of about 1,700 people in there, all fans of my work for many years now. And I'm just really glad to welcome more folks. So, you can always hit me up on X or on Instagram as well. It's the same username. Mhm.
That's amazing, Gossamer. Thank you for joining again. And this is a great episode, and looking forward to seeing that Tamagotchi, Tiger Bob Tamagotchi,
The Tiger
someday.
Gachi, yeah, Tiger
Yeah, the
Bob
Tiger
Virtual Pet.
Gotchi.
That's what
You
it'll
already
be
thought of the
called.
name. That's amazing. There you
No, I
go.
can't call it that. It would just be Tiger Bob Virtual Pet, and I'm excited. Yeah,
I
for sure. It's definitely
I
high on
am
my
very
list.
bad at those games, so to remember to feed it and stuff. So I
I'll
really,
make sure you can't kill it. I'll make sure you can't. He
yeah,
can't
okay,
die.
please, because that would be, yeah, because I would be the one to do that, and then I'd feel really bad. So, um, Gossamer, thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye.